located in many different chapters of the books of ahadith. Imam Bukhari, some of the scholars have mentioned this hadith in Kitabul Iman because of Iman. Someone has mentioned in At'ima because of food, and some has mentioned in Ad-Diyafa, mentioning in hospitality. So the first portion of the hadith talks about that who is a believer. It says the example of a believer is like a horse which is tied to its rope and to the stick that is there for the horse, or any type of object that you tie an animal upon. And then at the time when it starts to move, after that it only goes to that extent where the rope can take the animal, and then it returns back. So a believer, he makes a mistake, but since he has Iman in his heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving him that strength that at one point he realizes mistake and he returns back. That is a sign of Iman. That how would you know that when I'm making an error, and that gives me the conscience that I should be repenting of the errors that I have made, mistakes and sins that I have done, then that is that, this is the sign to look into yourself that yes, I have Iman. Allah Azza wa Jal has, kept my Iman. But if a person errs and he makes mistakes and many makes mistakes and there is no fixing, then there is a problem with his faith. That is not strong enough to make him come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a true believer, the Prophet ﷺ said he makes mistakes, then he comes back and he returns. And then the second piece of information that is given in this hadith is, the Prophet ﷺ said, أَطْعِمُوا طَعَامَكُمُ الْأَتْقِيَةِ, that make sure your food is eaten by those who are pious. So what's the connection between the two? The first portion of the hadith and the second portion of the hadith. It is mentioning an action through which your Iman can be sustained. To love those who have Iman and who have taqwa in their life. You see someone who has Iman, someone who has taqwa. It should be your desire that if I give him some food or if I give him hospitality, he's going to use his strength at night to stand up in tahajjud, and Allah is going to give me that reward because I became the means of assisting him through giving my food. And this was something that was very much looked for in the people of the past, that they used to look for those individuals who are pious so that they can have the food and then they do ibadah and we get the reward. And that is something that we also need to look for. The second thing that the Prophet ﷺ said, that your favor should go more towards believer. And that means, it doesn't mean that we're neglecting those who are not atqiyah. We are neglecting those who are not pious. It is actually an encouragement to look for pious people and try to do assistance towards them and help them. Why? Because their ibadah is going to benefit. If you assist an individual, this person is pious, he has connection with Allah, and his piety is known, and he's God-fearing, and whatever ibadah that he does, Allah Azza wa Jal will also give you the reward of it. And that's another way of investment. So a believer is the one who looks for investments of akhirah, investments of reward, investments of things that will bring benefit into their spirituality. So this is why these two portions of the hadith, this is how they connect. The first portion about the believer, and the second portion, how that a person can start loving the people of Iman, because that will increase his Iman and it will connect him to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah to grant us the understanding. Ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant us the ability to practice on these teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Jazakumullahu khairan.